To what would you attribute the marked increase in negative sentiment by the populace toward China?
Well, I think it's the rising tension, the continuing tensions in the West Philippine Sea. I will, of course, clarify a little bit, says what you said. Actually, when you look at the data over the last 2 years, trust has actually gone down. It was as high as 90s. Now it's what 60%. No, their trust has not really gone up. It started to improve early part of this year, but it stopped improving after the second quarter. So what does it all say? It's clear still that there's a lot of the majority of our countrymen distrust China, but that distrust has gone down, and much has moved to ambivalence. This is an important aspect of the report. Okay, but on the second finding, which is focused on threat perception, it's very clear for majority of Filipinos, and this particular probe has been stable all throughout the last few quarters, that most Filipinos continue to see China as the greatest threat to the country. It's very little has changed as far as this public perception is concerned. So there are two findings here. It's not just still majority, but has gone down, no?
Okay.
And perception of threat, which continues, which is a serious perception, because you can it's firm, it's stable, and not really changing. It's around 79%.
But how would you explain that? In a way, they're polar, well, not exactly polar opposites, but the distrust is not increasing, but they view China as a major threat. So how do we explain that?
Well, the questions are two. These are two different questions. I think it's very clear that for many Filipinos, because of the last few months where there was very little activity happening in the West Philippine Sea by way of controversy, and at the same time, we're all focused on the corruption issues domestically. So there seemed to have a rise in ambivalence. The concern for China remains strong, says. So they're still consistent with one another. There was just some changes as far as movement of people from distrust to ambivalence. But when you ask about trust, it is still there's still less. Only 13% of our own respondents say they trust China. So it's still very firm. The trust is low, threat perception is high, and while I was stating all of this, the distinction is crucial. I think that threat perception is something that needs to be. Yeah.
Could it also be affected by the leaders or legislators who lean toward being pro-China? Could they affect the way the populace perceives China?
Well, there are lots of factors. The problem with our survey is that we did not ask why. But what seems to be clear is that perception is shaped by information. And there's a lot of information and disinformation out there. As regards our senators, the firm stance was only settled just a few days ago. This is a survey that was conducted December 3 to 11 in the fourth quarter of 2025. So we see that these numbers will actually deteriorate even more because this was a big issue. The crisis created by the quarreling between Philippine and Chinese officials would probably further deteriorate these distrust and threat ratings.
Okay, so would you say, Professor, that social media and so-called propaganda on social media, what goes viral, does this play a big role in how the survey results come out eventually?
I'll take my hat off as OCTA spokesperson and as a political scientist and answer your question, Sean, with a yes. Because a lot of misinformation is out there, and that definitely affects how people perceive the issue. But still, majority of the Filipinos see West Philippine Sea as a serious issue. majority of Filipinos think, number one, that we have to assert our rights in the West Philippine Sea, but we have to assert it, again, a majority in our surveys also say that we have to use the first step, which is to exhaust all diplomatic means. So it's clear to the everyday Filipino, the West Philippine Sea is ours. Number two, it's a serious issue and we need to assert our rights there. And number three, that diplomacy is the first step. You might want to guess the second step, no? Because they also gave three measures that the government should prioritize. The first measure is to exhaust all diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict in that area. And number two, to actually expand military presence, which the government is trying to do, no, in those areas, whether it's naval or through presence. And third, to modernize our armed forces. So the response, the sentiments of our countrymen with regards to how the government should respond to this continuing crisis is very clear. And I think that's where the government takes off, because its current response in the West Philippines is largely supported by the population.
Well, in relation to that also, Professor, back in September, you had this survey where Filipinos, or 80% of Filipinos, say they support the government's transparency efforts, exposing the actions of China, especially in the West Philippine Sea. And younger Filipinos actually compose majority of that. So what does that tell you as a researcher? What's driving this interest from the younger generation?
I think it's everything they see in social media and the news. You know, for many Filipinos, at least in our FGDs, many of them feel very bad, no, about how our Coast Guard, our fishermen are being treated in these areas. The continuing harassment being experienced by our countrymen. Some even say in the FGDs, they don't like seeing our flag, getting wet when, our boats are water cannon. So all of this not only breeds distrust, it feeds into the rising perception that China is a threat to national security as far as the Philippines is concerned. And that particular approach is very hard to, to mitigate. It's very hard to get sentiments down unless there's really significant, a solution to the problem, which I feel at this point is still far away. So how does it affect Philippine-China relations? I think even the Chinese embassy is looking at this data and seeing it. What needs to happen offhand in the short run is to de-escalate this tension that has just occurred over the last few weeks, and see if calm and diplomacy will get both sides talking and start this long process of trying to find a solution to the rising tension in the West Philippine Sea. I'd like to emphasize, yeah, of course, I'm being optimistic there, but the one point that I want to emphasize is that the tension in the West Philippine Sea is not it's not the end all and be all of our relationship with China. We have to understand we have a trade relationship with China. It's an important trading partner, and at some level, this is not should not be the definition of that relationship. So I guess that's where the DFA comes in. They see the big picture and they see that, while we disdain the behavior of the embassy and its officials, that the big picture should not be lost on us, that we have to move forward with more constructive and progressive relationship with China.
Maybe the social media word war will change after seeing the results of your survey. But also you did have some interesting data on self-rated hunger and self-rated poverty, which, like a huge drop in self-rated poverty, 19 percentage points down from the third quarter to the fourth quarter. At the same time, it's ironic because our third quarter GDP 4%, fourth quarter 3%, and yet we see that drop. How do you make sense of that as a political scientist, Dr. Ranjit?
Yeah, it's really hard. We had to recheck our data because it was the largest drop in self-rated poverty in a quarter. Looking back at all our surveys on this particular probe, which is self-rated poverty, it went down 17%. Percentage points, and to illustrate that, it was 14 million, a little over 14 million families in the third quarter of 2025. It went down to a little over 9.5 million families in the fourth quarter of 2025. More than 4 million families felt better in terms of poverty than in the third quarter of 2025. So what could possibly be the reason? It could be myriad, no? One would be government programs for poverty alleviation have kicked in, improvements in employment during the fourth quarter, but they weren't as significant as projected. The economy still grew. It didn't reach its, it didn't reach its targets, but it still grew. Economy still expanded, albeit I think a little over 3%, which is not very impressive. But all of this put together may have created, I think, stabilizing food prices. No, you have to understand, inflation went down to less than 2%, 1.8, I think, and that stabilization of food prices was a very big, may have been a very big factor in creating these kinds of survey results. So it wasn't just food poverty. It wasn't just poverty, self-rated poverty. It was self-rated food poverty went down 19 percentage points. 5 million families said that they had better quality food in the fourth quarter. So maybe Christmas kaya yan or all of these things.
Okay,
So-
if we could shift topics and wear your political analyst hat once again, your thoughts on the Supreme Court affirming its ruling on VP Duterte's impeachment.
Well, one thing's for sure. No, I'm not a lawyer by training, but I've observed this particular, issue for some time. While the Supreme Court has affirmed its former decision, what seems to be problematic in my view is, the new strictures that they've imposed on the process of impeaching, top leaders of government. Impeachable officers, as stated in our Constitution, the President, the Vice President, members of the Commission, the Supreme Court. It's now much harder to hold these people accountable. That's the reality. Now, as regards to the particular case of VP Duterte, we have to accept that's the Supreme Court's position. But, the reality is the decision of the courts didn't just talk about the merits of the case. No, they basically suggested new strictures that make impeachment, holding our own leaders accountable, much, much harder today. And that's a reality. Now, the House, if it's progressive, will probably have to rethink its rules, no, to go to accommodate these new rulings. But the reality is, it's made impeachment less potent as a tool for holding our officials accountable. That's my own, not off that, it's my position, yeah.
Okay, but the question also is, Professor, do you think there is judicial overreach on the part of the Supreme Court with this decision? Because as we all know, under the Constitution, the House of Representatives has the exclusive right to initiate all impeachment complaints. In fact, one of the constitutional framers, Attorney Rene Sarmiento, told our sister program Storycon that he thinks there is judicial interference. What are your thoughts?
I'm not a lawyer by training, but as regards to their basic assessment of the impeachment process against the VP Duterte, I have to agree, with their decision. But with the additional strictures, I think there is, I think it's only fair to say that there is actually overreach, no? Some would argue activism, and some would argue overreach, because the new strictures make it so much harder to hold accountable leaders. Now, we're thinking about Sara Duterte, we're thinking about PBBM, but in the future, what if we have really bad presidents and vice presidents, or for that matter, bad Supreme Court chief justices or associate justices? How can we now hold them accountable? It's much, much harder now to actually undertake this process given these new strictures. But then let's see how the House will respond to it, yeah.
All right, we thank you for your insights. That was Professor Ranjit Rye, founder and president of OCTA Research.